Rightio. G'day. I'm back, and this time we're going to paint a plague marine in under 2 hours. We're going to speed paint this bugger. This is going to be a new series where I paint a model to battle ready standards in 2 hours. So let's get to it. The first thing we got to do is consult the almighty paint rack. And we're going to let the paint rack choose the colors for us. We're not going to use any skill whatsoever. Nah, we're not going to do that. If we want it to look good, we've got to do the work ourselves. Let's use the old noggin and just start somewhere. We'll start with bone for the armour. How about that? And we're tossing up here between iron rack flesh and Morghast bone. And then we're going to just add a little bit of black to the armor using Abaddon black. And for the trim in all the metal areas, we'll get into it with a bit of lead belcher and we'll rust it up good. Maybe we'll use some scrag brown for that rust. I'm not sure yet at this stage. There's some fleshy pipes and whatnot. We're going to use Rakarth flesh for that. That'll do a bit of skin and any kind of fleshy pipes. We're going to hit the whole thing with some washes too. At this stage we're not sure what yet, but we'll just pop them there and have a think about it. For the wooden areas, we'll base those with Steel Legion drab. And we're going to get some of this here rust. So we're just grabbing colours and sort of popping them together, seeing how we feel about it. Get a bit of a yeah vibe. Always got to get some white on there and some grey. And so we're just sort of establishing the basic colors, and then we're going to add something interesting here. We're going to add some kind of glow, and I'm not sure what we're going to do yet, but it's going to be something like this. One of these colors, a bit of yellow, a bit of greenish yellow maybe. Not sure yet. So this is my caveman color theory, where we just get all our paints together like this, and just as long as we're having a look at it and we're going yeah, and not nah, then we're all good. We're going to be happy. Right. So what we're going to do next is we're going to get all our paints and we're going to whack them on our wet palette. We're going to put a little bit here and a little bit there, and it's going to be like one big happy family of colors. It's going to keep our paints nice and happy. It's going to keep them nice and cool on the wet palette so they're not going to dry out. It's also going to be like a second confirmation that these colors are working together in a positive way. They're not having little arguments, being like, no, that's not going to work here. We don't want any blue in this model. That blue's going to clash with this color choice. That's not going to be the best decision for this color scheme. You get what I'm saying? So we can visually see all our colors together, working well. And the other thing that we're doing is we're speed painting here. So we're painting this boy in 2 hours, no more, no less. So we don't want to be messing about looking for the pots when we run out of paint, or when we go, oh yeah, now we need a bit of Abaddon black. Oh, where's the Abaddon black? I don't know where it is. It's bloody hiding over there in a massive crap on my desk. So we don't have to worry about wasting time fiddling around, opening pots, shaking them up, all that. We've got the paints right here, right there, ready to go. And it's also possible that some of these paints that we're putting on here, we might not end up using, but we think we might use them, So better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. We're going to keep these skin tones and the bony sort of colors, the browns. We're going to keep them together just in case we feel like getting our mix on with them, trying to mix them up a little bit. Bit of cross-pollination between Rakarth flesh and maybe some Screaming Skull or some Ceramite white. We'll keep them all together like that. We've got that lead belcher all the way over there on the right. He's a bit of an outcast, isn't he? We're not going to be mixing him with some Rakarth flesh or Ceramite white, are we? Pallid Witch flesh. We might need that. Why not? Let's just get some. Put it on there. Maybe we'll use it, maybe we won't. I use the Everlasting Wet Palette by Redgrass Games, and I can't recommend it enough. It's so good. I used to use like an old takeaway container with some paper towels soaked in water and a bit of parchment paper on top. That did the job, you know, it was alright. But once you use this, you'll never use that shit again. It's really good. Like, it's got a lid, so you can put that on there when you finish painting so the paints don't dry out. You can come back and use this the next day, even a week later, and the paints are still good, mate. It's got a really nice foam core that soaks up that water, keeps everything hydrated. You know, so you don't have to be using bloody toilet paper soaked in water or some ready paper towels. Check this out. This is my Nurgle's Rot, and it's been sitting on my desk for a while. I haven't used it in yonks, and it's sort of split. See, it looks like some kind of coronavirus situation. So I thought I'd just get some of it out while it was split. Didn't shake it up. Maybe we'll use it. I'm putting just so much on the palette. I don't know why, but we're doing it. I went in for a second dip, even. Righto, let's prime our model. We're going to use Chaos Black Spray. Now you got to shake the shit out of it. Shake it for 5 minutes and she'll be right. Check it out. This is how we prime. Short bursts from left to right, 20 to 30 centimeters away. This is not a heavy bolter. Don't pin the trigger. We're mowing down orcs here. Left to right, psh, 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 talking like that. Just short bursts. Don't overdo it. Take him to about 80% and then stop there. See how you can see through the spray? What we want to do is create a really light speckled layer that the paint is going to stick to. Now we're going to hook up Doombull Brown. Get some on the wet palette. Thin it right down with water. Lots of water. We're going to use our Big Bopper, our large base brush by Games Workshop. Great brush. And we're going to start smashing this all over. I'm talking we're going to pump it. You can see how wet it is. Pump this Doombull Brown, mate. Like, go out the back. Go down to the dam. Get the pump. Hook it up to this Doombull Brown. And just drown this guy in a paint. It's really wet, so you're not going to do any... Oh, well, okay, hang on. We're switching over here. We're switching to our Red Grass Games miniature holder. Where was I? Oh yeah, we were pumping the Doombull Brown all over this guy. It's really, really wet, so you're not going to do any damage. All of that water is going to evaporate. It looks like we're just clogging detail here, but we're not. The paint is so watery that it's not going to do any damage at all. That water is just going to evaporate, leaving the pigment behind to settle nicely. And we're not going to have any brush strokes at all. It's going to be a really happy situation for everybody involved. Now what we're doing here is we're applying our first layer of color. That prime before, that was not about making the model black. I could have primed it pink, wouldn't have mattered. Yeah. Could have got out my pink spray paint and primed him pink. Would not make a difference to me. That prime is about creating a really light speckled layer which creates a slightly textured surface for this paint to stick to, so it's not going to peel off and it's not going to flake off, and because it's so watery it's not going to just be slipping around all over the plastic. Whoop, we're losing him. Usually I use a bit of super glue, or I drill the base of the feet and pin it to some cork or something. We got 2 hours, mate, so I thought I'd just get out the blue tack and just stick him on that base there, and it would be good. But we're having a bit of a crisis here, but we're running with it. We're still going. We're just being brave. We're not worried about handling the model. This is a Plague Marine, boy. This is going to get some. This is going to get some fingerprints on him, and we're gonna love it. We're gonna be chuffed about it. Okay, and this is how he looks, all nice and dry. What have we got here? Hairspray from the supermarket. We're going to shake that up. Shake it good. Now, what are we getting ourselves into here? We're spraying it with hairspray from the salon. Well, this is basically chipping medium. This is the same stuff. Works just as well. We just have to get a nice, good coat of this stuff on there. And that's going to allow us to make some mad scratches and chips later on. Make sure you let it dry for a good hour before hitting it with some Chaos Black spray again. Again, short bursts from left to right, 30 centimeters away, 20 to 30 even. If you're feeling adventurous, get into the 20 centimeter zone, sure. And don't forget to cover up your miniatures holder before you do that spray. Whoopsie. Now let's turn the page to chapter 3, blocking in. Let's get into it with a bit of Rakarth flesh, thinned down with water. And we're going to use this to start base coating all of the fleshy stuff like the face and some of the pipes. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a bit of a real talk here about medium versus water. I get asked all the time, should I thin my paint with water or medium? All you need to know is that medium is like see-through paint. It's like paint with no color. It's like looking through a window, but a really thick window with lots of brush strokes on it, because when you use it straight up out of the pot, it's like using paint straight out of the pot, right? It leaves brush strokes everywhere because you're not really thinning the paint that much. All you're doing is reducing the pigment count. But when you use water to thin your paint, that water just gradually evaporates as the paint dries. You know, it just like almost lazily just pisses off, leaving the pigment behind to just chill out and just settle in, you know, like a controlled way without leaving brush strokes all over the place. So we've painted his face with Rakarth flesh. We've painted his little tentacle finger. Now we're painting some pipes. We've got to selectively choose which pipes we want to be black and which ones we want to be fleshy coloured. Because we want to mix. We don't just want all the pipes to be the same colour. That's kind of boring. And we don't want a boring miniature, do we? I'm actually quite liking this Rakarth flesh, and particularly how some of the black shines through it as it's a little bit thin. Let's use that later on, hey? Let's use that to create a little bit of translucency. Righto. More cast bone on the wet palette. You're up next. We're going to use this to start base coating some of the armour sections. All of the stuff that we want to be a bone colour. And again, we need to be selective here. We're going to have some parts black in some parts bone colour. I like to imagine Plague Marines constantly replacing their armour, fixing up little bits. Personally, they probably should do it a little bit more because most of the stuff always looks broken. But generally speaking, I like the idea that some of them are going to be a bit hickledy-pickledy, hey? A bit all over the shop. You know, a bit, how's it going? One thing we want to do with this bone colour is we're going to use it as a bit of a device to draw attention to the centre of the model. Yeah, that's right. We can do that. We can use colours to direct attention. You know, someone's looking at this model and we're telling them where to look with what colours we use and how we use them, where we use them. For example, if you use a lighter colour, you're going to look at that before you look at a darker colour. That's just how the eyes work. I'm not an eye doctor or anything, but I know that if you use a bright colour on a dark model, the viewer is going to look at that bright colour before they look at all the other dark stuff on that model. And I, Mezgike, likes to draw attention to the center of the model where possible. And there's lots of ways you can do this. Sometimes the model has a glowing plasma gun and he's holding it close to his chest. Sometimes the model's got a helmet and you can paint his eyes glowing. Maybe the model has like a Tony Stark type power core glowing out of his chest. You know, maybe sometimes you don't have any of that stuff in the model. Sometimes you got to be a little bit more creative or be a little bit more clever with your color theory. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're using bone amongst all the black armor to lighten up the center of this model. So we've got the top of his backpack there. That's a bone color. We've got his collar around his chest. We're painting that bone. This shoulder pad up here, drawing attention to this top half of the model. That gauntlet on his right arm, that is drawing attention to the center of the model. So we're going to avoid painting his legs with this bone color because we don't want to be drawing attention to his feet, do we? I don't want people looking at his toes before they look at how cool his head is, for example. Now, this model does not have a glowing plasma gun. This is a little bit of a challenge to make this model stand out. But, you know, I got your back. We'll sort that out. We'll sort that out with some cool effects later on. But for now, what we got to do is create a really good foundation using this bone color and placing it in the center of the model where possible and using it to direct attention towards the important stuff on this guy. Now, usually I'd be letting this first coat dry before hitting it up with a second coat, but you know, we got 2 hours to paint this, so we're getting into it quick smart. Check it out, we're not even washing our brush. We're just dipping it into a bit of Steel Legion drab and getting on with some wood. We're going to paint this little grip, this little wooden guard on the bolter. Great color, Steel Legion drab. We'll use it to paint the pouches and the leather and also get it on all over the cape. We're not worried right now. We're speed painting. What we've got to do is get all the colors mapped out and we can do a bit of cleanup later. And I'm really liking how the colors are working together. That Rakarth flesh has just a of pink to it. The bone is kind of like a nice sickly yellow color. And that wood is just a really subdued, manky ass wood color. But it's not vibrant and it's not going to steal attention. It's not going to steal attention from the center of the model. It's just going to do what it's told to do, which is be wood. And don't be fancy about it. Just be wood. Lead Belcher. It's a really good color. We're going to use that to base all of the metal. We're going to start with the trim and just work our way around the model. Anything that looks like metal, we're going to hit it with Lead Belcher. This has also been thinned with water. Every single color that we put on this model has been thinned with water. Didn't even get my medium out. Not using it today. Haven't got time for that. I often like to get a bit of two-tone metallic on my models. I usually have a silver and a gold. But on this guy, we're just going full silver. He is a Plague Marine, and we really want to focus on rust. And gold doesn't really rust, it just gets that kind of corrosion look, which we don't want. We don't want to be introducing any kind of bluey green color on this. We've got our colors set. So we're using silver only, and we're going to rust it up. And remember way back when we were using some Doombull Brown, wasn't that long ago, maybe like 15 minutes ago, we were using Doombull Brown to base the entire model. We chose Doombull Brown, but we didn't really talk about why we chose it, did we? Let's have a quick talk. We used Doombull Brown because it's a very red brown. It's very rusty, and it works really, really nicely with this bone color. When we scratch that bone color off and reveal that rusty red underneath, it's going to make our dreams come true. It's going to relate to the rust that we apply to this metal later on. It's also going to have a really nice contrast, a really nice warm contrast against this kind of sickly bone color. So we've got to think about things like that. When we set up a rust color, like this Doombull Brown that we've got hiding underneath this model, secret to be revealed, eh? When we choose what color that is, we have to think about that, because brown is not just brown. Rust is not just rust. You can use a reddish rust, you can use an orangey rust, or a greenish rust even. Get some green and yellow and funky, get funky with it, But think about what you're doing. Bloody hell, just have a think. Just have a sit and think. Just have a beer, or if you're underage, don't do that at all, please. Just have a chill. Before you put any paint on this, just think about what you want to do and why. Now remember, what are we doing here? We're painting a battle-ready plague marine here. We're not going to try and win awards with this paint job, but we want it to still look tip-top, don't we? And we've only got 2 hours to do it, so that means a few things. That means we need to be smart. We've got to use the old noggin. We've got to be moving our brush hand fast. We've got to be controlling it, but more importantly, we've got to be doing it fast. This is the point to do things quickly, not neatly. We're going to do a bit of a neaten up later on. Obviously, don't go playing silly buggers with it and just painting like a bloody chimpanzee. Try to be neat if you can, but just focus on being fast, right? And while you're painting, think about what you're doing next. Because I painted this in 2 hours, but I'm making it up as I go. This is my first miniature for this little force, and it will be a force. It'll be a force to be reckoned with, mark my words. I haven't painted an army for a long time, but after painting this guy, I'm keen as mustard. I start to digress, but the point I'm trying to make is, after we've painted this guy, we now know how to paint the plague marines for this army. So the next one won't necessarily take 2 hours, will he? He might only take 1.5 hours. And maybe we can just call it there, and then we've got a 1.5 hour plague marine instead of a 2 hour plague marine. Or we could spend that extra half hour and get some finesse onto them. Maybe once we've got 5, we could spend an extra 2 hours and just clean them all up a bit. Getting back to some Rakarth flesh here and adding a few more pipes. Adding a few more flesh pipes, I should say. Just deciding that there's possibly a little bit too much black going on, and we need a little bit more interest. We're going to add some here on his shin too. And this is part of the process as we go along, as we get going deeper into that 2 hour paint session. We might decide to alter some things, and that's okay. We might not even use some of the colours that we picked right at the start in our caveman colour theory, but that's okay. We've got to evolve. We've got to learn as we go. We've got to learn what this model needs. He's going to tell us. Now, we're actually using Rakarth flesh and doubling up a little bit here. As I mentioned before, I think it looks really cool how some of that black is shining through the Rakarth flesh. It's looking a little bit sickly and maybe a bit frostbitey and just rotten and yuck. I haven't even done anything. All I've done is a half-assed coat of Rakarth flesh, but I'm digging it. I'm running with it. But what we're doing now is enhancing it a little bit and selectively adding a second coat to it, which is creating a bit of an easy blend. So we're just popping some on the top here, top of his head, because we want that to be a little bit brighter than the sides and the face as well. We want that face to be a little bit dark and rotten. On the pipes down here, we're just going to focus this second coat where we want it to be a bit more vibrant and stronger. And we've got a bit of a quick and nasty, sort of a dodgy kind of blend happening here, but that's okay. All we're doing is placing this light, just mapping it out, basically sketching it, and later on we'll come back and smooth it out a little bit. She'll be right, mate, don't worry about it. Yeah, starting to come along now, starting to shape up. Rightio. Dump the brush in some Abaddon black on that wet palette. Let's begin mopping up. We've got lead belcher all over the black armour. We've got bone all over the black armour. We've got some Rakarth flesh on the black armour. Let's clean him up. Super easy. Now, usually I'd be cutting this footage because you don't want to watch me, clean up my mistakes. But I'm showing you every single brush stroke from the start to the end of this model. So, you're just going to have to cop it. You're going to have to watch me fix my own mistakes and just love it. It's all part of the journey we're on together. Happy little journey. Fixing up happy little mistakes. By the way, no mistake is a bad thing. Here's a bit of Mezgike wisdom. No mistake is a bad thing. Every mistake is something to learn from. Even our boy Einstein said, someone who doesn't make mistakes is someone who doesn't try anything new. Hey? So, make mistakes and learn from them. Now we're cleaning up the other way with a little bit of lead belcher again. In our haste, we often miss some of the parts. Some of the elements that should be silver, just totally overlooked them. Like these pipes in here, these little cables. We can make some of those silver just for interest. Make some of them black, make some of them silver. We're nearing the next chapter of this Plague Marine. So we're doing a quick cleanup, a quick overlook, making this silver, making that black. Making sure it's all looking okay. And as we hit the 30-minute mark, this is how he looks. We can be proud of this. He actually looks quite good. There's not a single bit of blending or single bit of shading or highlighting on him, but we can see that he's looking good. He's working. These colors are working together. That bone is doing its job, and it's telling us to focus on that top half of the model, that top central half of that model. That wood on the bolt gun, it's still doing its job. It's still doing what it was told to do, which was just be plain old simple wood. You're not fancy wood. You're just plain wood. Don't try standing out. Don't steal everyone else's attention. No. Just be yourself. Don't try and be something you're not. How good is it just having all of the colours laid out on the wet palette right there from the start? Half the time we're not even washing the brush. we're not interested in washing the brush, are we? What we are interested in is getting colours quick, getting them on the model quick. In our haste again, we forgot to add this bone colour on the chest under his armpit. Just going around and enhancing some of this bone colour now. Focusing it on where we're going to put some of the highlights later on. Dipping our brush into that rakarth flesh without even washing it again. Decided that we needed a little bit of a fleshy pipe down there. It actually did make that pipe a little bit too bony, yellowy colour, so I'd suggest you wash your brush if you want to use a bit of rakarth flesh. I just did then, and this looks a bit cleaner now. We're really enjoying that, the pinkness of that rakarth flesh and the fleshy properties it has. We want to keep that a little bit separate from the bone colour, which is obviously a more yellow kind of hue. Now, while we're just going around cleaning up this model, I've got a bit of information for you, a little bit of goss. Mezgike fact number 1. On the night before I painted this model, I woke up. I'd been bit by a spider 3 times. On my right arm, there was 6 holes in my arm. And it was pretty sore. And my fingers weren't working properly, like I couldn't close my fist. You know, when you bump your funny bone, you smash your elbow and you hit that nerve and it sends a jolt through your arm. That's what it feels like when I try and close my fist. And to this day, at the time of narrating, I still can't close my fist without that jolt shooting down my arm. This just happens sometimes where I live. You wake up, oh bloody hell, been bit by a spider again. We're going to use our first wash for this model, Nuln Oil. We're just going to get heaps of it on our wet palette because we're going to use quite a bit. We're going to pump it again. Look at that. We're just going to drench that brush in Nuln Oil and just hook into it. Basically all over the model. And you want it nice and thick, nice and strong. It's really good stuff. The only place where you just want to be a little bit more careful with it is on the armour here. You don't want to go too bananas with it on that bone colour. Now, I do love a good block of wood as a miniature holder. You almost can't beat just a lump of wood. But how good is this miniatures holder by Redgrass Games? How it spins. Just using my thumb there to just to rotate it in just a gentle way. It's soothing. Now, we forgot to paint this little part of his leather belt, so we're just quickly washing that brush and switching to some Steel Legion drab. And we'll just fix up this little bit here on his belt before we continue with the Nuln Oil. And that's the beauty of having everything right there on the wet palette ready to go. Then we can rinse off our brush and get straight back into the Nuln Oil again. Let's have a quick talk about why are we using Nuln Oil here. Like, what makes me choose my washes? And this is my process on almost every model I do. I base all of the elements and then I'll use a single unifying wash to tie all of those colors together so that that bone, that silver, that wood color, even the rakarth flesh, they now all have something in common. and that is the Nuln Oil. And so that Nuln Oil affects the hues of each of those elements, ties them together as one big happy family. Now, so why do I choose Nuln Oil instead of, say, Agrax Earth Shade or Coelia Green Shade or something like that? It's very important. What wash you pick will determine the overall mood of the model. In some of my other videos, for example, the Archon, the Dark Elder Archon, I used Coelia Green Shade to do this, and it gave it sort of a sinister greenish, inside a dark spaceship type vibe. The Night Lord, I wanted him to look very cold and like he's walking around outside in the snow in a dark night. We gave him a Drakenhof Nightshade wash, and that gave him a bit of that dark night mood. We're going black with this guy because we want to make a dark, brooding, toxic guy storming through a cold wasteland, not too dissimilar to Chernobyl. I don't want to affect all of the colors too much. I just want to darken them. And then so later on, when we introduce some spot colors, some toxic colors, let's let them do the talking. And all these colors that we've got going here support them by being dark and mean, Rightio, we're up to chapter 4. Start blending in that. Let's use some Rakarth flesh and pop him down next to the Abaddon Black. Then we're going to start mixing them a little bit. And all we're going to do is pull a little of this Rakarth flesh into the comfortable zone of the Abaddon Black. So what we're doing then is we're making a few different stages ranging from black to Rakarth flesh, adding to our swatches. So let's start with one of the darker swatches in this Rakarth flesh / Abaddon Black mix, and we're going to begin adding some interest to the black parts. So this is basically a very dark grey, and we'll use it to start mapping out some of the light placement. Now we don't need to be too technical here. We're not scientists of light as such, even though we all should be learning how to place light. We're mostly focusing on just creating some interest because we don't have a lot of time. We just need to get some of this on the model and get the model looking good, get that black spruced up a bit. Here on the cloak, we're just painting these big folds using this dark grey mix. Now, light placement and how light works is a big topic. It's too big to go into for a short video like this. I say short, it's still bloody 2 hours, eh? But we can have a quick chat about it. The first thing you need to know is that light reacts differently depending on the shape of the surface. Sounds obvious because it is. There are flat surfaces, there are cylindrical surfaces, there are spherical surfaces, and there are tapered cylindrical surfaces. If you can understand how light works and bends around a cylinder and how it bends around a sphere and a flat surface and a conical cylinder, you will be able to use those principles to bend light to your will like a bloody wizard. Let's come back to this in a minute. We're just going to step up the grey chain and access some of this lighter grey. towards the Rakarth flesh side of the spectrum. And now we can just add a little bit of lightness to the highlights that we just applied on the black. Now we're creating a really, really basic blend. Super basic. But remember, we're fighting the clock here. We've got 2 hours, so we're not going to be doing the world's smoothest blends. They're not going to be as smooth as a baby's bum. But what we want to do is, within the area that we just painted, we just want to put a little bit of this lighter grey and refine it and create a small blend. Now, going back to the light placement, so you need to understand how light works on 4 3D shapes. And when you do, you'll be able to apply those principles to things like shoulder pads or the backpack on this guy. See, that's a big cylinder. So we'd be able to apply the light principles to that as a cylinder. Those little shoots coming off the side of his backpack, those are tapered cylinders, which means, they're like a cylinder, but they flare out. We've got a whole bunch of flat surfaces, and then we got a bunch of weird stuff that's kind of hard to interpret. That's where it gets a little bit tricky. That's where you might have a sphere that's sort of blending into a cone, or a cone that's blending into a flat surface, and you've got to sort of interpret, how am I going to place light on this? For example, when you're placing the light on a cylinder, it will always be a bar of light, a straight beam of light traveling along the cylinder. And when light hits a flat surface, the light usually travels along the surface and kind of pings out the other side from whence it came. So for example, if you have a flat surface and the main light source is coming from the right hand side, that light is going to shoot down from the right. It's going to hit the right hand side of that flat surface, and then it's going to sort of travel along towards the left, and it's going to sort of shoot out that left side. But it means that the light is going to kind of collect on that left side. It's going to look lighter. So you're going to make a gradient going from dark on the right to lighter on the left. So what we're going to do now is, using some of this grey mix, we're going to thin it right down with water into a glaze. And then we just quickly glaze over this really dodgy blend that we've done. And it sort of disguises it and blurs it together a little bit. You get a bit of a cheeky, quick and nasty blend. So you have your main dark grey, and then you've highlighted it to a little bit of a lighter grey, but there's this clear distinction between that light grey, the dark grey, and that black. And so this glaze just kind of blurs it all together. But let's not get too heavy into light placement and non-metallic metal and all that and how it works. We've only got about 1 hour and 15 minutes left to finish this model. So what we want to focus on is just creating some areas of interest on the black, and just keeping some of those light principles in the back of our mind. As an example though, his front shin pads, we're going to see those as sort of a kind of a cylinder, but also a flat surface. They're more cylindrical than flat, but we're just going to pretend that they're pretty flat, eh? And the light is going to kind of come out the bottom side of them more than the top, because the light source is going to be coming from the top of this model. So what we're doing here is we're taking a bit of light grey from this chain of greyness, the grey chain, just controlling it a little bit on our thumb there. And now we're going to use it to sort of blur some of the lines on the fleshy parts, because it's basically Rakarth flesh mixed with Abaddon black. And those are the two colours that we've got going on our fleshy pipes. Remember, they were based with Abaddon black, and then we got some thin translucent layers of Rakarth flesh over it. So Abaddon black plus Rakarth flesh, that's what we're going to use to blend those distinctions. So here we're adding a little bit of darkness to this tentacle, just to add a little bit of interest where it tucks in under this arm here. And now it's time to add a bit of highlighting to our bone colours. And the same thing that we did with the Rakarth flesh and the Abaddon black, where we mixed it together on the wet palette, we're going to do the same thing here with Morghast bone and Screaming skull. And then we're going to start highlighting the tops of these bone areas, like this gauntlet here. Now we're going to hit it with a little bit of a tissue because our paint's a little bit wet, and we want to get a kind of a dry brush consistency on our brush, so we can start sort of stabbing the brush in a stipple kind of motion. It sort of gives the armour a bit more texture, a bit more interest. It's really easy to do as well. You can sort of get a little bit of blending going on just by basically stabbing your model with a mangled up brush. Now remember, this backpack here is basically a cylinder, but the sides are flat surfaces like this. So we're going to kind of direct the light towards the bottoms of those flat surfaces, and the actual cylinder part here is always going to be a bar of light going along it. We got another flat surface there on the other side, so the light's going to be at the bottom. So that means we're going to have this nice opposites situation where the sides of the backpack are going to be highlighted towards the bottom, but then that adjacent side to it, the rounded side, that's going to be kind of more highlighted towards the top. The elbow pad here can be kind of seen as a bit of a sphere, so the light sort of collects in a circular fashion along the top of it. That's the same for the shoulder pads. It'll kind of just be highlighted at the top in a circular motion and then just gradually fade out as it rolls around. We'll just do some super basic highlighting here on his hands and his knuckles. Just try and get each little section of his finger. They're basically just little cylinders, aren't they? Remember, we're keeping our eye on the clock and we're just doing a bit here and a bit there, going all over the model. Doing a bit of his knuckles and quickly fanging over to his backpack. Doing a little bit of a highlight on the top there. Yeah, so how's it going? Sorry I buggered off for a little while. This is my first video in about a year. Just been busy, doing a bit of life. What have you guys been up to? Been painting much? Let me know what you've been painting in the comments. Also, let's get this channel to 100,000 subscribers. If you haven't subscribed to me, just bloody do it. Just hurry up and do it. Press the button, the subscribe button, the one. If you do, I'll make more videos like this. But if you don't, I won't. So this is a 2-hour video, right? I spent 2 hours painting this model. So these videos are a lot more manageable for me. I've got a really busy life, got lots of things going on. So the masterclass videos that I've been doing, like the Archon and the Night Lord and that, I'll still be doing those, but they take a long time. So my idea was to do some battle ready videos for you guys instead for a little while. I'm going to be able to pump these out. I'm going to be able to fully send it. So possibly looking at even one of these every month, maybe even once every 3 weeks. See how we go. So in the comments, let me know which battle-ready models you want. How about a Blood Angel? Maybe a Space Wolves dude. Or a Nighthaunt, or a Salamander, or some Orcs. Doesn't matter. Let's hear it, let's see what you want. Right, we've switched to some Screaming Skull by itself now. To just ping out the highlights here, brighten them up along the edges and the tops of the cylinders, tops of the shoulder pad here. We were going up and down the grey chain before, and now we're going up and down the bone chain between Moorghast Bone and Screaming Skull. If you're curious to know what specific model this is we're painting, it's actually a conversion. I can show you a little video on how to make that guy, but basically he's the Blackstone Fortress Chaos Lord, because he's just a badass. We used him for the Night Lord. We use that as a base, and then his arms and the bolt gun are just Plague Marine arms from the multi-part Plague Marine kit. His power pack, that's from the multi-part Plague Marine kit. It's just from the Special Weapons Marine, the guy with the stink flamer, whatever it's called. You know, it's like a heavy flamer that probably shoots like fart gas instead of fire. The head is from the Age of Sigmar Chaos Chariot. That chariot comes with a few different head options so that you can make your chariot like a Khorne chariot or a Slaanesh chariot or a Nurgle's chariot. So we're going to use the Nurgle's head from that kit. It's really cool. Basically it looks like a bloated zombie. He's got a double chin. So we just had to cut the Chaos Lord head out off this model, replace it with the bloated Nurgle's head. We also had to carve down the sides of his torso around his fur coat so that the Plague Marine arms would fit on. And the other thing we did was we used some piping from the Blight Lord's kit. The Blight Lord Terminators. There's one Terminator that has a bunch of pipes hanging out of his guts, and we just chopped those off and glued them to the back of the backpack. Pretty basic, simple conversion. It was probably done in about half an hour. We're adding a little bit of this Screaming Skull mixture to the face here, just along the edge of his skin where his face sort of splits open and you can see the skull underneath. We're not really sure why we're doing it, we're just doing it. Later on we'll probably get some washes over it and cover it all up anyway. Don't worry. Adding a few little really light pings to the black armor here. Again, this is just with the Screaming Skull. Kind of using it to go all over the model actually. Just a bit here, a bit there. Not worried about whether we're doing it on a bit of bone armor or a bit of black armor or even a bit of fleshy pipes. It's just a very light color that we can use to highlight all the elements at once, and again giving all those elements another thing in common with each other. Now we want to do a little bit more work on the skin colors on his face and those fleshy pipes, and we're going to use a bit of Rakarth flesh mixed with Ceramite white. Ceramite white is discontinued, but you can use whatever white you want. I just like Ceramite white and I've got it, so I'm using it. We're just going to paint over that bone color that we just did on his face because we're not too pleased with it. We want his face to remain kind of pinky and fleshy, a little bit more distinguished and separated from the bone colors. This is just for the fleshy colors, like this tentacle here. We're going to create a little bit more interest and a little bit more of a blend here and there. So we pop out the tips of that tentacle a little bit, make it nice and bright. And you'll see you'll see me getting my finger into it, getting a bit dabby with my fingers. Point of that is you can just smash a bit of paint on and dab it with your finger, and then you get a bit of a cheeky blend. It's like what I was talking about before, like when you make a mistake. Sometimes you put too much paint on, you go, oh, whoops, and dab it with your finger. But then you go, oh, that actually looks good. I created a little blend. So in summary, sometimes a mistake can be a little happy accident. And then we've learnt from that mistake, and now we use it as a little trick. So this Rakarth flesh mixed with ceramite white, it's helping these fleshy parts to get that much needed contrast. So they're going from a light pinky colour to almost a dirty dark greyish colour, like a rotting skin colour. And here we go. Add a little bit of paint, then dab it with our finger, then do it again, get a bit more paint on there, dab it with our finger again, dab it again, and we're getting really quick, easy blends. They're not gold medal winning blends, but they're making our tabletop standard marine look a bit more interesting. Giving the model a little bit of finesse, giving it some attention, some detail. These little bits of details will go a long way. Let's switch to our fine brush now and get back to our grey mix and start sharpening up some of the black areas, like this gun casing. Just hit some of the edges and create a little bit of sharpness. Ping those corners. And we use the edge of the brush when we do this. Just let that edge of the brush just run along the edges of the black casing. It'll do the work for us. Now, one other advantage of having all of our colours laid out in swatches on the wet palette is that it's kind of forcing us to just mix our own grey, which is a good thing because it would be very tempting to just get out some, Eschen grey or even administratum grey or something like that to be doing this work here. But what we're doing is we're using colours that we've mixed. We've already used these colours. We've used the Rakarth flesh for the skin, the Abaddon black for all the black armour. And now we're making a new colour using both of those colours to highlight the black, rather than just getting a pot of some random grey colour and introducing some sort of foreign hue to the model. So this way we're keeping everything a bit more uniform, and we're reinforcing that mood that the model has. You'll be surprised at what a grey can do. A grey can go a long way. You might be thinking, yeah, but it's just a quick edge highlight on the black armour. No, it's gonna change the whole feel of that black armour. It's gonna change the whole environment that this guy's in. If we're gonna go and get some Eschen grey, that's just basically a bog stock grey colour. That's potentially going to clash with the colour scheme that we've got going, that we've set up on the wet palette. So when we're doing our caveman colour theory right at the start, and we're laying down colours on the wet palette, we're giving ourselves everything that we need to paint this model. If we need a grey, we'll just mix one up using what we've got there. If we need a brown, we'll just mash some colours together until we get what we need. Right, we're at the 1 hour mark now. This is how he looks after 1 hour. If you just want to do a battle ready plague marine in 1 hour, this is what you could do. He's got blending, it's got some shades, some highlights, it's got interesting color. We're directing the focus of the model to where we want it to be. We don't have any spot colors yet though. We haven't given the model that spark that he needs, the character, to distinguish him from everything else. We're going to do that in the last hour. But for now, we've still got a few more minutes of tidying up this black, going all over the model. Round and round we go. Just getting these edges, even underneath his feet. We can do along the bottom of the cloak, the hem of the cloak. We can also add a few little scuffs and scratches if we feel like it. And I like to add a little bit of a highlight along the bottom of this armour here, just so it makes it look like that black armour kind of tucks in underneath the metal trim. We can do that at the top of the shin pad as well if you like. Just wherever we think needs it, adding a bit of interest and a little bit of sharpness, a little bit of detail. Especially here in the cracks where the pipes are popping out. We want those to look sharp, like those pipes have just kind of exploded out. Kind of punctured through the metal and the metal's sticking out and it's sharp. You'd probably get a bit of tetanus up you if you touched it. Right. How about Mezgike fact number 2, eh? Here's a bit more goss for you. I want to give a shout out to one of my badass fans. One of my Mezgikeans who enjoys a bit of a Mezgike video. You're all a bunch of badasses as far as I'm concerned, but there's one badass in particular who I'd like to say g'day to. And I don't know her name. All I know is that she goes by Nanas. And she had a birthday this year, 2020. On the 10th of May, she turned 90 years old. So how about that? She's 90 years old and she's getting into a bit of Warhammer. I tell you what, I hope that when I'm 90, I'm still painting Warhammer. Nanas, you're awesome, and thanks so much for watching me paint and ramble on. And sorry about my bad language, but you're a dead set legend. Thanks so much. Let's get back to the model, eh? We're spending a little bit of time here, aren't we? Making this black look good. Pinging the edges and popping out those highlights. We're not just doing the black, but we're even getting into a bit of those fleshy pipes too. Using that same colour. Cross-pollination. Happy families. Make sure when we're highlighting the black that we just don't go too far with it. There's always a fine line when you're highlighting black with greys. Like the blacks can often start looking a bit too grey if you get too much highlighting going on. You want to be subtle, not so subtle that it looks a bit unfinished, but you need to just tread that fine line between going too far and not doing enough, getting that perfect amount. With this bit of fur here, we just hit some of the corners of it, hit some of the tips, just like ping, 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 along those clumps of fur. We don't need to get every single one. Not going to be spending too much time on it. Just a little bit. Now it's time to do a bit of little work on this wood, this basic wood. Just mixing some Steel Legion drab with Screaming Skull. Just a little bit. And the same thing that we've done before, we're just going to start highlighting the edges And maybe we'll just gradually add a little bit more screaming skull to that mix as we get closer towards the outside, or the highlight points. And remember, this is just some basic wood. We don't want to go too all out on this wood. Right, let's roll into part 5. Effects. Let's make a whitewash and add some glow to this guy. We're going to use ceramite white, and we're going to thin it right down with water. You can see how runny it is. It's basically a wash. And we flood it into his double chin and the area around his face where his collar is. Now what are we doing here? What have we just done? We haven't even talked about this yet. It's all happening so fast. I'll tell you what we're doing. We're creating glow out of nothing. We're getting a bit blurry too, getting a bit out of focus. But that's because we're going a million miles an hour. Sometimes when you're going so fast, life's just a blur anyway. So let's run with that. We just got to hit some of these points on the model that we want to be sort of toxic glowing, right? So some of these pock holes, some of these little divots, this part in his arm where the tentacle's popping out, the part in the other arm there with the pipes popping out. So it's sort of giving the impression that there's some kind of funky radiation glowing from within this fella's armor, kind of shining out through his collar and all the holes in his armor. Now, while we've got this white out, let's ping out his eyes. We're going to set that up for some mad glow later on as well. Now, there's the magic word, set up. That's what we're doing right now. Whenever I create glow, mate, set up is what you want to do. You want to set it up with some white, and then we can add that color later on. Again, while we've got this white out, we've got it nice and thin. Let's bring out that highlight in the white armor, in the bone armor, popping it out with white. Look at this, getting his knuckles, just making them come alive, getting that contrast happening. We just hit each knuckle on his hand there. We just blitzed it. 1 knuckle, 2 knuckle, 3 knuckle times, however many fingers he's got. Sometimes that's not a straightforward answer with these plague marine boys. Sometimes they might even have 6 fingers, I don't know. Maybe sometimes they got 4 fingers and a big floppy appendage popping out the other side. Right, now let's make some magic happen. We're using clean water, except that we're not using clean water, we're using dirty water straight from a jar. And we paint that onto the model on the surface, and we use some kind of wooden tool. Most of the time I use a toothpick, but I bloody can't find my toothpicks, can I? So what I did is I used an old paintbrush that was retired, ripped the end off, sharpened it up into basically a sharp wooden tool, and then we used that to scratch off the surface of this armor. So way back at the start, an hour ago, right, we used that Doombull brown, and then like a crazy person we drowned it in hairspray, and then we started spraying over it and painting layers over it. What we're doing now is we're painting water onto that paint, and that activates the hairspray. And I don't know the science behind it, but some magic thing happens where all the layers above that hairspray become weak, and you can basically scratch them off. But anything underneath that hairspray stays right where it's supposed to stay. Now, we're being a bit cheeky here, and we're using a metal sculpting tool. That's usually a no-no, because that can penetrate through the hairspray and start scratching stuff off right down to the plastic. So you've got to be really careful if you're going to do that. But this wooden tool that I'm using here is starting to get a bit soft from all the dirty water that it's soaking up. So it's not doing a very good job of scratching it off. So I'm kind of flitting between using this wooden tool and my metal sculpting tool. But just make sure if we're going to use something like that we only use a little bit of force and we don't use the direct point of it, because that's just going to dig trenches into your plastic, and that's not going to look very good. What we want is that nice red Doombull brown color to shine through. That's going to start making some dreams come true here. that contrast of that nice, hot, rusty red with this kind of sickly bone colour. It's going to be bloody bellissimo. Bellissimo. It's going to be really good. So remember, we use water to activate that magic chemical reaction that's going on, or softening the paint, and then we get our tools and scratch it off. And let's try to be as random as possible here. We'll get some scratches going this way, some scratches going that way. We'll get some skinny scratches. We'll get some fat scratches. We'll get stone chips, rock chips, big chips, small chips, bullet chips, cold chips, hot chips. Just try to be as random as possible, just like me. There are a lot of ways to do chips and scratches on a model. This is just one of them, called the hairspray technique. But there are other ways. You can literally just paint the Doom Bull brown on over the bone armour. You can stipple it on with a brush. You could sponge it on. Now the sponge technique, that might sound like a bit of a wonky way to do battle damage, but it actually works really well. You just grab some old sponge and tear some chunks off it to make it look a little bit random. And then you can grab some tweezers and hang on to it with the tweezers, dip it into the Doom Bull brown, and just lightly dab it, sort of stab it even. And you get these random shapes, and it's a pretty convincing battle damage effect. And then you don't have to mess around with all the hairspray stuff that we're doing here. But I think the hairspray technique actually looks the best because you're actually making genuine scratches, and they're creating a natural hollow, and so they naturally pick up the highlights. So it's like a 3D scratch, the real scratch. Now let's make this model look a little bit more filthy. We'll use Agrax Earthshade, famous Agrax. Just get some on the wet palette. We'll be using a fair bit of it. And we'll start smashing it all over the silver areas, but also a little bit on the bone colour, enhancing some of the shadows and also making it look a bit rusty and just grimy and dirty. All over the silver. We can pretty much drown the silver, enhancing the shadow here on the cylinder, on the backpack, and then we'll do it around this spike as well. Get some shading happening at the base of that spike, the tops of this side of the cylinder, bottoms of this side of the cylinder, getting that opposites effect, and all this metal on the back of his power pack. It's going to be all super rusty and just manky. If we get some on the pipes, we can just dab it off with our finger. A couple of tips when using washes like this. Number one, if we want to be drowning the model like this, we don't really want to thin this wash with any water, because you can get some weird effects. Paint sort of separates and you get a bit of crystallization, and it doesn't really look very good. So if you do want to thin it, if you want to be a bit more subtle with that wash, thin it with medium. The other tip for using these washes is make sure you shake the pot really, really well, because if the pot's been sitting there for a while, the paint kind of separates a little bit. Again, it goes a bit weird, and I've had instances where I haven't shaken the Agrax properly or the Known oil properly, and when you apply it, it goes kind of glossy and weird. So that's not very desirable. So make sure you always give your washes a really good shake before using them. One really cool thing about using this Agrax after doing all the chipping and the scratches is that this wash can actually sort of settle and sit inside some of those chips, and it just further enhances them and makes them look even deeper. Now we're about to use some magic here. This is Vallejo dry pigment. The color is burnt sienna. We're just going to get some and put it on the wet palette there. And while that Agrax Earthshade is still wet, we're going to apply some of this dry pigment to the metal areas specifically. Don't be too upset if we get some on the armor, on the bone or the black. It's not the end of the world. We can just sort of wipe it off with a damp brush or a tissue, or we can just run with it. Just makes him look dirty. See, we're actually putting some on the bone here. It's giving it a bit more red. We're really enjoying that kind of red rust color now, aren't we? See, we're smashing it all over this metal on the back of his power pack, the cylinders, the gas tanks, or whatever they are. All this trim, the spikes on his shoulder pad, just get it all over it. And because this is a dry pigment and we're applying it to the wet Agrax Earthshade, we're getting a bit of texture. That dry pigment is sort of clumping to the paint, to the wet Agrax, and we're getting a bit of roughness, a bit of graininess. And if it gets a little bit too clumpy here and there, we can just sort of use the brush to move it around, push it around on the model, flatten it out, sculpt it almost. Just put it where we want, how we want it. We can be as clumpy or as subtle as we want with it. Being super clumpy on that shoulder pad there. And on this skull and his belly plate. It's getting heaps of it. And you can see, the more rust we add to this guy, he starts coming alive. The red is just giving him that boost of color that we were lacking before. Bit of a spot color. And the brush does start getting a bit, how's it going? It's all frayed and pretty fluffy. But that's okay, we're not doing surgery here. We're applying rust and grunge, making him grim dark. And now that we've done that, we can clean it up a little bit. Going back to our grey chain, the Rakarth Flesh to Abaddon Black mix. Just selectively picking which part of the range we need, lighter or darker. And we can go over the black and just clean it up a little bit, still refining it. Keeping our eyes on the clock and deciding whether or not we've got time to add a little bit more finesse to those black edges. Paint these fingers here, the trigger finger. Sharpen up the peaks of his feet. And the edges around his sole of his foot. Everything's a balance, see? It's a balance between how long you want to spend on something versus how refined you want it to look. If you've got lots of time to spare, you can refine it, keep refining it, making it finer and finer. If you don't have much time, you've just got to call it. Let's get some Stormhost Silver, shake it up good, and make sure it doesn't look like this. See, mine's been sitting on the bench for a few weeks, haven't touched it. So you got to give it a really good shake. And we're using Stormhost Silver to highlight the edges of the metal. We can't highlight all the edges, we don't have time for that. But what we want to do is make some of the edges look nice and sharp. So his spikes are really rusty, but we don't want them to be like totally useless spikes. We want them to still be sharp and dangerous. So by hitting the edges, the corners of these shoulder pads and the spikes and any other prominent areas of the metal, using Stormhost Silver, we give that metal a little bit of finesse, a little bit of sharpness. Let the audience know that we're thinking about them, we're respecting them by putting effort into our rusty metal. We're not just dumping it into a pile of dirt and going, there you go, that's my rust. We want to focus this on the corners of things, on rivets, on the edges, wherever there's a spike. This will be at the tip, drawing a little bit of tension, a little bit of interest. It gives the viewer something interesting to look at. Some little sparkly bits of metal in the sea of orange rust, where the bullet shoots out of this bolt gun here. That's gonna be a bit polished, so we want to make sure we hit the inside of the gun barrel. How about we do another Mezgike fact? Mezgike fact number 3. So I got a wife and 2 kids, and it basically invaded my house. So I got no room to paint. I got no spare rooms in my house. What's more, I got to spend heaps of time being a husband and a dad. So how do I fit any painting in? How do any of us fit painting in? That's a real problem for us, isn't it? A lot of us just don't have time to do this kind of thing. But you know what? We've got to realize something. We're all given the same amount of time every single day. We get 24 hours each. And it's up to us how we use it, how we manage that time. So I've been faced with 2 problems. I've got no time to paint, and I've got no room to paint. So my solution was to set up my garage, set up a corner in the garage. So right now, when you're seeing me doing this painting and filming, I'm filming in my garage. And how do I find time to do it? Well, I get up at 4 a.m. every single morning, and I fit 2 hours of painting in before my kids wake up at about 6, and I got to get ready for work. So that's Mezgike fact number 3. I wake up at 4 a.m. every morning, and I paint in the garage, and it's fucking cold. Right, it's time to add our glow. We're going to use Lamenter's yellow for this. Usually my go-to would be some kind of green or even a red maybe for something like this, but how about it? Let's try some yellow, see how we go. It's a bit different. All we've got to do is start glazing it over the white that we already set up before. Remember? We set up that white. Now all we need to do is tint it. It's so easy. It's ridiculous how easy this glow is. Remember, all we did was flood some white wash in around his double chin, and now we're just glazing over it with some transparent yellow. Don't want to go too heavy on it. You don't want to overdo a glow. It's always better to do too little than too much, because you can always just add a little bit more if you need to, but you can't remove a layer. It gets a bit tricky to fix that up. Now, Lamenter's yellow was a glaze by Games Workshop, but they discontinued it when they brought out the new contrast paints. So if you want to copy this effect, you might need to use a yellow from the contrast range. I reckon you'll be able to get a similar effect with one of those yellows. In fact, all of the contrast colors are really good for doing this kind of thing. You can basically go and check out the range of contrast colors and use this exact same effect using whichever color you want in the contrast range. This could be pink or blue or red, whatever you want. And it's so easy. All you've got to do is set it up with some white. Set up those points that you want the source to be coming from with white. and then just basically walk into a hobby shop and just pick any contrast color you want, and it'll do the job. See how we're dabbing it again with our finger, making sure that we get a bit of a decent transition. It's not just going yellow, 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 then all of a sudden Rakarth flesh. We get a bit of a transition. Now, why did I use yellow for this guy? Well, while I was painting him, I was thinking about Chernobyl. I wanted to get some Chernobyl vibes up him. So I'm going for like a really toxic radiation, radioactive type guy. And I reckon this yellow screams radiation. Like imagine measuring him with a Geiger meter. Let's try some water effect. Some Vallejo water effect. We're going to just put some on the wet palette there. Mix it up with some of that Lamenter's yellow. Now we've got sort of like a yellowish goo, a bit of slime. All we're going to do is smash it into the join here where I attached these pipes to his backpack. And I did it in a dodgy way where I didn't really blend the transition at all. Just got them pipes and just glued it to the backpack without a care in the world. So now we're just using this slime to just disguise it. We're also whacking a little bit on his tentacle, making it look a bit yuck. And tiny bit on his face too. Just around his temples. And also a little bit here on his forearm with pipes coming out. Now we set up that glow before with some ceramite white. Let's just enhance it and fix it up a little bit. We'll get some more ceramite white and paint some on the edges facing the central glow. So that means his shoulder pad on the rim, this little part of his gun, just along the edges. Anything that's kind of really close and facing his face, that glow, and might pick up a little bit of extra light just so we can make it look like it's radiating and glowing. So these pipes here and a few of these little tufts of fur, just pop them out with a bit more white. Around his collar here, just run that edge of the brush along the edge. And while we've got this white, let's take the opportunity to quickly highlight some of the corners of the black once again. Remember, this is just a process where we go back and forth, just gradually refining it, keeping our eye on that clock, making sure we're not spending too much time on this or that. Right, we're at the 1.5 hour mark now. This is how he looks after 1.5 hours. He's actually looking pretty good at this stage. However, he doesn't have a base yet, does he? And that's going to be sorted out pretty soon. Building and painting his base is part of this 2-hour battle ready Plague Marine. Because he's not battle ready if he doesn't have a base now, does he? He's not ready for battle if he doesn't have a base. He's battle unready. Throughout this whole process, we've spent quite a bit of time on the black, haven't we? That's because the model is predominantly black. A lot of the surface area is black. So we want to spend a lot of time on that. Make sure it looks good. Let's get back to our Lamenter's yellow. And we can glaze it over that white that we introduced a minute ago to enhance this glow. Make this radioactive head really, really glowing and sell that toxic vibe. Like, we don't want to go anywhere near this guy. The rads would just be through the roof. We wouldn't last 2 years after being near this guy. Now, when I'm painting a model or coming up with a color scheme, I like to think of one word, and that word is in the back of my mind all the time, sort of directing me and dictating how the model should look and if we're on the right track. The word for this model is Chernobyl. I thought about the word, thought about Chernobyl, and how I can kind of emulate that vibe, just to make it look like this guy is a plague marine that comes from that damned place, a toxic, radioactive place, a scary place. It's very eerie. I can imagine him walking around there. Let's use some Abaddon Black and try and refine his eyes now. We're working on his face. We're going to thin it with a little bit of water, as usual. And what we want to try and do is sort of paint around the eyes, just to help these glowing eyes look even brighter, but providing a little bit of contrast. When you put something dark next to something bright, the contrast multiplies. So you let that thin Abaddon Black just kind of flow into the detail, the sculpted detail around that eye. And we'll do the same for this one. I think we also tried to paint a little bit of a pupil on that eye, but later on we're gonna get rid of that. We're just gonna make glowing yellow scary eyes. Now we're lightening up the top of the head again, using our boy Rakarth flesh, mixed with a little bit of ceramite white, I reckon. See how you can still see some of that Abaddon Black showing through that original Rakarth flesh layer. We're digging that, we're keeping that. It just looks yucky and rotten. We can paint over it a little bit to try and create a bit of blend and lighten up the top of the head. Switch to some ceramite white by itself. We're going to have another stab at these eyes. Just painting the whole eyeball white. And you can see that black contrasts really well. That black that we painted around the eyes a minute ago, it makes that white look even whiter. And the white makes that black look even blacker. We can use a little bit of this white to continue highlighting this skull, his noggin. And then we're getting back to some Lamenter's yellow, glazing over those eyes again. We do a little bit of back and forth with the face, adding some black, adding some white, glazing back over it with yellow again. That's how we do it. We're using a bit of black to glaze the face now. And again, we're doing that to create some contrast so that this yellow is kind of glowing through his mouth. It looks even brighter and sicklier. And creating a bit of darkness on his face is a bit interesting. We're going to continue that up through the skull here and make that skull look like it's rotting from the inside. It's a bit unexpected and unusual. Usually we'd be painting that like a bone color, but nah, not today. we're getting our black out and we're making that skull really dark and rotten. Going back to some white. And we're going to put some white in the nasal cavity. Continue that radioactive glow. So we've got some of it glowing out of his mouth. We've got some of it glowing out of his neck, out of his eyes. So we want to keep that consistent and make it glowing out of his nose hole. So we just flood it with some white, thin down white, clean it up with a little bit of black. Enhance that rotten black skull. That skull's riddled with some kind of gangrene type situation. It also creates a visually interesting stripe up his face, like a big black scar. And we're using our yellow glaze again to pull it all together. So as I said before, we go a little bit back and forth. We pop those whites out with a bit of white, and we darken those blacks down with a bit of Abaddon black, and we get back to our Lamenter's yellow and pull it back together, so that black is not just fully black, it's kind of a yellowy black, and that white is not just white, it's a yellowy white. Isn't it? Hey? The final step to this manky ass face is to just use some ceramite white by itself and just polish off those edges, crispy them up, especially around this scar where the skull's protruding. We want to just make that flesh look a little bit more interesting and lighter on the edges, as well as here on his forehead. If you do too much, we just dab it, don't we? And if we want to put some bright shines here and there, we can do that with this white. Oh, have a look at us. We're even getting into his feet now with this white. Just a little dot here and there. The final pings of the black. Bit here on the cape, bit there on the pipe, bit on his toes, probably a little bit on his heel and on his gun case, the corners. Just a really final last touch before we get into his base. And I always do this as the very last thing I do on the model. Just using some pure ceramite white, we just ping out all those last corners, those final highlights. Right, part 6, let's build his base. While we've got the model blue tacked to the base, let's attach some skulls and some interest. This is a little Cadian dead fella. We're going to glue that to the base using plastic glue. And you could use any sort of skull or bit of junk or whatever you want. And then the next thing we're going to do on the base is add some shrubs. So let's drill out a hole. And I just snapped it because we're going 1,000,000 miles an hour. So let's just get rid of that bit of junk. And let's just keep going. The drill bit still works, doesn't it? So drill that hole out. And usually I'd just switch to a fatter drill bit to widen that hole, but I don't want to waste time looking for my drill bits because they're going to walk about, haven't they? So let's just use the scalpel to widen it. Just very carefully. It's very sharp. It's a brand new blade. We don't want to chop too many fingers. So we just stick it in there and rotate it. What have we got here? Roots from my wife's pot plants. You know, if you go and grab a pot plant and you hold it upside down, sometimes it's got gone a bit root bound and it's got roots sticking out the bottom. That's what I use here. I collect those sometimes and just put them in a container and let them dry out. Then we just trim down the trunk of it. Make sure he fits in the hole, which he does. And we get our little plague marine and pop him on the base and make sure it's all working well. And notice that we're keeping that blue tack there. That's just so we know where his feet go. So we're not going to like drill a hole where his feet are going to stand. So let's get our broken drill bit that still works just as good as a new one. And we'll drill out another hole because we want 2 shrubs here. One thing I think about when I think about Chernobyl is all those overgrown weeds and shrubbery and all that. That's a big part of it, in my opinion. So we just pop him in the hole and have a fiddle and see how we want to compose this base. Once we're happy with it, massive blobs of super glue will do the trick. While the shrubs are just sitting in those holes, just drown it in a bit of super glue at the base. Notice we've got the shrubs blowing the same direction as his cloak because we're respecting our audience. They know that the shrubs are going to blow the same way as the cloak. Now we can use our clippers to snip off the bottoms of these shrubs underneath the base. So the base is going to sit nice and flat. Astrogranite. That's what we're going to use now. We're going to smash that all over the base as quick as we can. We're racing the clock here. Got about 18 minutes left before this model needs to be on the tabletop, being shot by a tower. We've got to make sure we get it all over the base. And that means kind of bury this skull in it a little bit and bury the shrubs in it so that the shrubs look like they're coming out of the ground and that skull looks like it's kind of half buried in mud. And if we just get a bit on the rim, just get our finger and wipe it off. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to sprinkle a little bit of garden dirt. And this is legit, just dirt that I've gathered out of my garden. It's got rocks and sand and all sorts of crap in it. And here's my little stash of roots that I've rummaged around in the garden in my wife's pot plants, and we're just going to sprinkle some of that on there. We're basically making a recipe here. Just getting a little bit of dirt and sticks and stuff. Oh, we're getting some oregano, some Master Foods oregano. Light sprinkle of that, pinch of that. Sprinkle it on there, dust it off. Now we can get our brush out. Well, it's a little bit wet. We can just sort of massage it into the astrogranite while it's still wet. This is creating sort of like a muddy, slurry, and interesting texture. And we can get our model. Remember, this astrogranite's still wet, so we're being careful here. But what we want to do is press it into that astrogranite and create 2 little footprints. So that's going to tell us exactly where we want to glue this model later on. And it's also going to mean that he's going to sit flush. He's not just going to be kind of floating on top of a bumpy astrogranite base. You're going to be sinking into that mud nicely. Boom, part 7. We're going to paint the base. What we're going to do is we're going to spray it with Chaos Black Spray. Now, one thing I didn't mention earlier, which I should have mentioned, is make sure you're using all the protective gear when you're spraying like this. Use gloves. You don't want to be spraying this shit all over your hands. Make sure you're wearing a proper ventilation mask. You don't want to be breathing in this. It's nasty as. And also make sure you're doing it in a well-ventilated area, such as out the back. Don't be doing it in the garage. Hey? Now, once we've got a nice solid coat of Chaos Black, we're going to just make a selection from our grey chain, probably about a mid-grey. So that's the Abaddon Black mixed with Rakarth Flesh. And we're just going to dry brush this base all over. Don't worry too much about the shrubs, but mostly around the dirt and all that and the skull. Just a nice quick dry brush. Make it look like a nice dark, scary wasteland. It's cold and it's toxic. It's just great. It's just not a nice looking place, is it? You can see those herbs and the sticks and all that stuff we are applied and mashed into that astro granite has made a really eerie looking base. And it's so simple. Barely any effort at all. No inconvenience whatsoever. Next we're going to paint the shrubs, and we're going to use some of our Morghast bone and just very gently paint these shrubs. See how we hold our finger up against the shrubs so that we're not going to snap them off, so that the pressure from the brush is only pushing the shrubs against our finger. It's not going to bend them too much and put too much strain on them, because these are very delicate. You've got to be very gentle with these. Something to be aware of if you're going to do something like this for your models and use them in games. You might want to make these shrubs a bit shorter. Next we're going to use a bit of that light mix from the grey chain, sort of more towards the Rakarth flesh end of the spectrum, and just very basically highlight this skull. We want this skull to look white and ashy and dried. We don't want it to be kind of too brown and rotten and manky. So this skull's been there a long time. It's long dried out. You know, if you went up and smelt this skull, put your nose to him and sniffed him out, he's not going to be stinky. He's just going to be like a fossil. We can just add a little bit of ceramite white to it, just to get those edges and kind of draw a bit of attention to the center of that skull. Next we're going to use lead belcher just to paint his helmet, and we're going to make that helmet look really rusty. We're just going to paint it exactly the same way that we painted all of the metal on the Plague Marine. So once we've done a base coat of lead belcher, just drown it in some agrax, let that helmet kind of marinate in it and dirty up a little bit before we move on to the next step, which is to add some more of that Vallejo dry pigment, burnt sienna, and you just clump it on there just like we did on the Plague Marine. And once we get those clumps on there, we can use our brush to move it around, bend it to how we want it, flatten it out, leave some bits a bit chunky. We want this helmet to look like it's been there for a very long time. That helmet is buggered. And it's not much effort to do this kind of thing. All you got to do is just put one little skull on a base, and it makes that base interesting, even for an army. Like, you could do an army of these Plague Marines, no problem. It only took 2 hours from start to end. It's what I would call a nice little secondary or tertiary detail. So once you've looked at the model, the main focus areas, like his glowing head, his cool armor, then you're like, oh, he's got a little skull on his base. It's not much, but it's just something. Just makes things look a little bit more interesting. Here we're going on with the final stage of the rusty metal, using a bit of Stormhost silver to just lighten up those edges. Now, this is not what you think. This is just plaster. This is just plaster of Paris that's been dried. And we're just chipping off a little bit, and we're going to crush it up a little. We're creating a little bit of a dusting of snow. So using some kind of round container, we just roll over it and crush it up. Not too fine. You don't want this to just be powder. You just want tiny little clumps in a little bit of powder. Now what we're going to do, in a zenithal manner, we're going to spray some hairspray onto the base and the Plague Marine. So zenithal meaning from the top. So it's sticky on the top, and then we can gather up some of this plaster that we've just mashed up and lightly just sprinkle. We're just gonna twinkle it on there, snowing. It's very lightly snowing on this Plague Marine. And what we're going to achieve is snowflakes falling and landing on the top surfaces of the model. And that hairspray created a kind of temporarily sticky layer for this plaster to stick to. if we get a little bit too much here and there, we can just dust it off with our brush. And once we're happy, let's super glue this plague marine to the base and finish him off. Good amount of super glue, we don't want him going anywhere. Would be a good idea to dust off some of the snow where his footprints are going to be, but is Mezgike doing that? No, he's not. He's not giving a crap. He's just doing it. But he's a master. Look at him. He managed to get it super glued first go. Now we're going to use some Abaddon black and paint the rim. And this is what it looks like when I'm not wearing my glasses. Just everything's out of focus. I did this on purpose just so you can see what I see when, my daughter's run off with me glasses and I can't find them. But I've got to paint anyway. So I'm just giving you a moment in the life of Mezgike. Enjoy, alright? Enjoy. Valhalla Blizzard. Boy, what a piece of kit. If you have not got this paint, what are you even doing with yourself? You need to get it. This is pretty much the best snow effect I've ever used. I've done various homemade snow effects in the past, but this Valhalla Blizzard is just amazing. It's just so good. It's the most convincing snow effect ever. You can make the snow look dry and fluffy, or you can make it look wet and icy. Have a look right there. It's like I just went outside and went up the mountain and got some snow and brought it back home. We're just using our brush just to pop a little bit here and there, because that plaster looked all right, but it only did half the job. That plaster just gives it kind of like a kind of powdery layer, but we want a few icy clumps of snow just to make it look even colder. Strategically put it where you think it's going to settle. A little bit here and there on the shrubs, some on his toes and his feet. And see how that Valhalla snow just kind of sticks to those shrubs. It's just amazing stuff. I reckon it's the best effect paint that Games Workshop's ever made. It's just amazing. I hope they never discontinue it. And this is just such a rewarding stage of the model too. We're literally just finishing it off. We're nearing the 2-hour mark, and 2 hours ago we started with absolutely nothing, and now we've got this. This has got to be one of the most rewarding models I've ever painted, believe it or not. Like I've spent weeks painting a model. If I'm trying to win some kind of competition or something, the model can take weeks, even months. Ridiculous. This is one of the most rewarding models I've ever painted, and I got it finished before Lord of the Rings was over. We want to make sure we give it a nice solid matte varnish, and then he's all done. Hope you enjoyed watching this video on how to paint a battle-ready plague marine in under 2 hours. Make sure you let me know in the comments what you think. Subscribe to me. Hey, just do it, alright? Don't ask questions, it's just good for everybody. Let me know in the comments what other battle-ready miniatures you'd like me to do. Right? And let's finish off with one more piece of goss. Hey, Mezgike fact number 4. I've got a new website. Go and check out mezgike.com, and depending on when you're watching this video, there either is or will be very soon something very exciting coming to mezgike.com, and that is Mezgike miniatures. Yep, been working on my own miniatures in the dungeons down under, sculpting, casting, 32mm resin miniatures coming to a tabletop near you. Pretty soon you'll be able to buy miniatures designed by me, sculpted by me, and you can follow along to my painting tutorials on exactly how to paint them. How's that? So go and have a squiz at mezgike.com, sign up to the newsletter, and be the first to find out when we launch. Get the old bit of discount, news on the products that we're making. See you over there. Hooroo!